In this video, I'm going to show you a full stack Kotlin multi-platform application. It was written in about 4 hours. This project uses Ktor to create a REST interface on the server, as well as consuming the interface on the client side. Data is persisted to a Postgres database via exposed. This is a lightweight ORM written by JetBrains. The UI itself is React, written in Kotlin JS. Although it's not covered in this video, adding an Android client would be a breeze. Adding an iOS client would be very, very doable. The basic motivation for this video was to show off how fantastic Kotlin multi-platform is. I also wanted to demonstrate how powerful Ktor is for creating a lean server-side app. Expose was thrown in the last minute, trying to keep with the whole Kotlin theme of the video. Okay, let's see the app real quick. So here we have, let me refresh it because I just restarted the server. You have teams and players. A team has multiple players. A player belongs to a team. So now, let's add a team to the demo. We'll add the mutts. There you go. There you go. Has no players yet. Let's add a player to the mutts. So we'll add Doc Gooden. And I'll put him on the mutts. Boom. There you see Doc on the mutts. The mutts has Doc. Very simple. This is React, but it's written in Kotlin JavaScript. And I'm going to show all that later on. But I just wanted to basically give you an idea of how the application works. All right. Let's go and look at the actual code now. So I said Kotlin multi-platform. What does that mean? Well, here is a multi-platform project. I've got 4 modules, one being test, although everyone should be writing tests. I'm not going to go over that in this video. Instead, we're going to start with our common code. All right. What does multi-platform mean? So in the past, you've had a whole bunch of solutions. People are trying to get this magic bullet where you can write your server side and all your clients, and they all work together. And you write your client software once. Think of a combination of like React Native and Spring on the server side. It could all be basically you have one unified language for all your client stuff. You still have to write Java on the server side though. Well, what JetBrains has done with multi-platform is they've come to the realization that you're never going to be able to get a really good client application, something that looks great and works great, unless it's written natively. There's just too much going on the Android side, and there's too much going on the iPhone side. And when you write something, I mean, you've seen them, when you write your React Native applications, I mean, if it's something that's used internally, it's not a big deal. But if it's client-facing, it's not going to look right. It just never looks right. On the Android side, it looks kind of Androidy, but it's not really Androidy. And on the iOS side, it's the same. It's like, it's kind of, an application I'm used to seeing, but it's not. It has none of the good features that are offered natively, and generally they kind of look awful. And they feel a little sluggish, I've always felt, compared to a well-written native application. What multi-platform does is says, hey, we're not going to give you the ability to write your UIs with multi-platform. We're going to give you the ability to write the other as much as possible from the other side, your DTOs, your services. We're going to try and have you write, let's say, 65% of the application all in Kotlin, and then you fill in the rest natively. In this demo, I'm just going to do a quick version with that JavaScript plan I showed you, and the main multi-platform piece will be the DTOs and the Rex. And to expand upon this, if you've ever written an application, you got your, let's say you wrote up your nice REST interface using Java. You wrote it on Spring Boot. You used Hibernate, which is a mess. and you're serving out your REST interface. Okay, so now you're serving out data. Great. Well, now on your JavaScript side for the React, you've got to consume that data. So on the Java side, you write the DTO to get the data out of the application. And then on your client side, on the React side, you have to write a JavaScript version of something that's just basically doing the same thing. It's holding data. Well, if you use multi-platform, your DTOs will be written once. I'm going to show you that right now. All right, so DTOs. So here are my DTOs. Just for this application, I put my exceptions on the comment side, so they're usable on both. I'm using this init mode to simulate hibernates, how when the application starts, whether it drops the database, validates it, whatever. I've got recs. Recs is for inbound data. DTO is for outbound data. And got some static variables here. These are basically just keys that I'm using on my prop file. And then lastly, I've got use cases, trying to do kind of a clean code, Uncle Bob Martin type of deal here. Basic use cases for everything that is basically happening, the main story of what's going on with the application. Essentially, we're creating players and teams. That is what you saw there. So this is all my common code. But let's show the common code in use. So we're going to focus on the DTOs. So let's look at our team DTO here. Again, this is Kotlin, and everything you're going to see here is written in Kotlin. I'm using Kotlin serializable, okay? So I'm going to be able to take this DTO, use it on my Ktor REST server, and consume it in my React app. This one file, not writing anything else. It's fantastic. And again, because it's Kotlin, I'm going to slap a companion object on here to get the path that's going to be used for serving it on the server and then consuming it on the client. So let's take a look at this in action on the server side. So if we look at our server here, this is Ktor, very simple. With Ktor, you'd be able to get a REST interface up in probably like 40 lines of code. Essentially, if you want to see, it's as simple as having a route with a path, and then your get will respond with whatever you want to respond with. To show you that real quick, let's just look on our client side. So if we come here and you type /hello, there's your message. Neat, right? All right, so let's go back to our common code in use. So let's look at the team. So before I mentioned that I put a companion on that DTO. This way I know that whenever I'm dealing with, because I'm going to be using this team DTO in a lot of places, let's pack along the instructions of how to get to the service here. So here I got the rest path as teams. And if you want to see what is being served out from Ktor, instead of hello, I can type in teams. And you got your basic JSON. This will be consumed by the client, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Back to the server code. So really easy with Ktor. A lot of this is my nonsense. Okay, what I'm doing here is I'm loading a props file, and this is all my database specific information and whatnot. But very easy. Again, minimum lines of code. This whole thing is 110 lines of code. I'll go more in depth into all this stuff on the Ktor section, but now we're thinking multi-platform only. So I showed you how we're using it on the server side. Basically, we've got team. I'm saying, hey, get me the path. So now I'm going to respond to anything with the path of team DTO. And I'm going to basically, on the get, I'm going to get a list of everything in the database from a team standpoint. And just to show you that real quick, I'm going to be returning basically a list of team DTO when this get is called. Okay. Inbound, I'm basically going to use that rec file that we saw before, right? Again, this is how data is inbound is via rec, outbound via DTO in this application. So there's the rec, and again, this rec is written in multi-platform. It's on our common side. So when I showed that application and I created a new team, a new player, I was basically throwing that information I took off the form, stuffing it in a rec, and sending it to a post to /team or /player. And going back to our use case, which is, again, multi-platform, at least the interfaces, I'm defining the contract here. I'm going to take a request in, right? The create is going to take in request. Request is basically just wrapping the team rec. And I've got two outcomes here. This is a Kotlin sealed class. If you don't know what those are, check them out. They're amazing. And I'm either have a failure or a success. So going back to that server, you can see here, if it's a failure for the demo, I'm not doing anything. It doesn't fail. But for a success, I'm now basically responding with result.dto, which, if we look at the contract, is team DTO, part of, the common package. So that's how we're using the common code client side. All right. Let's look on the actual client side. I'm sorry. This is how we're using all the code server side. Let's check out how we're using it on the client side. Let me get that straight. So we go to our JavaScript module here. All right. And what I'm going to basically focus on is the pages I showed you. So what did I show you? Let's go back to the app and refresh in case you forgot what it looks like. Real simple. It's basically a couple tables, couple forms of teams and players. Well, how did I build this? Using those DTOs. The same DTOs I just showed you, the same DTOs that are created in the common library, not rewriting them on the JavaScript side. So we'll just take a look at team real quick. I've got, and I'll go over this more in depth when we get to the end of the video. But basically, I've got a table, and the actual React file here has a list of entities, which it has basically received from the server. Those entities are of team DTO, and then I'm just doing a for each, and I'm saying, hey, give me the ID, give me the name, give me the players. All right. And again, if you look at team DTO, I've got the ID, the name, and players. This is what I'm using. This is the data structure that's filling that table, or those rows rather. Again, written once. I'm trying to stress this. You write it once on the comment side. This is, any of you guys who've done any projects know this is fantastic, because how many times have you written your application out? You've got your kick-ass REST API. Everything's done. You're loving it, loving life. You go over, like, all right, you rewrite, however you're going to capture that data on the JavaScript side or capture that data on the iOS side. You're basically duplicating the work that you did already, but hey, it's what you got to do. Well, not with multi-platform. Multi-platform, you write it once. So if your client comes back, it's like, hey, for team data, I need to know the mascot's name. Well, you could just come in here and then add. And then, you'd have to do some work downstream, but now this DTO would be the same DTO that all your clients are using. So you're not having to touch two more files in our example where you had both a React client and a iOS client. So that's pretty neat. And this is just for DTOs. You can do so much more than this, but I wanted to keep the demo short and easy to understand. So we're just doing DTOs and recs in this demo. So back to that client code. So here you can see we're building off DTO, and going back to how Ktor plays in with multi-platform and how fantastic it is. There's no serialization work being done, right? So again, let's go back to our client code. We're going to look here. I created some services to consume and store the data off the REST interface. So really easy. Here you have team. And when I call fetch all, I'm saying, hey, I know I'm going to get back a list of team DTO by calling JSON client get. And then I'm just saying, hey, here's what I'm going to be expecting. And then endpoint and path, right? It's really that easy. This REST path is gotten again off Team BTO, which I showed you before. Same deal. It's just this is a derivative of data source. This, trust me, this is where this is. Okay. JSON client. We'll cover JSON client in the Ktor version of this video. Right now, I'm doing all the multi-platform stuff. So I showed you now, in summary, how we were able to write the DTO once in our custom module, or our common module, and use it on our Java module, which is not that big a deal. But now we're also using it on our client-side React code, which I think is a big deal and a giant time saver. And again, if we plugged in an Android project, not a big deal because it's Kotlin Java already. It would work seamlessly with this code. But the other thing too is, and this is not part of this video, you can use this code on the iOS side. So again, you're able to save yourself a lot of work. You're not rewriting over and over and over again the same basically data structure. So that is multi-platform explained for us in this video. Okay. So now let's go over the other technologies. I mentioned Ktor, right? Why do I like Ktor? Ktor is super light. So we've all worked with Spring Boot. Spring Boot is awesome, but it's a lot of code. I mean, a lot of times you'll be done with the Spring Boot. You start your Spring Boot application, it's nice and tidy, and then at the end of the week when you're done, you're ready to ship out or you're ready to show your client, you go back and you just have tons and tons and tons of files. Well, let's look at the files that I needed to create for our application. All right. Bare bones it. In reality, I would have to have our server code, which I showed you before. This is Ktor. This is all you need. You get your main function. You're basically giving it a port. You saw I was running on 9090. I'm loading. I got this twice. I'm loading my props up. And the props, I'll show you real quick, are just basically what you would do like if you were setting up a data source on like Spring, for instance. Right? But I got my props reader. I create a separate one. You can do this natively with some Ktor stuff, reading a prop file. But because my prop files tend to live in different places when they get launched out to production, it's easier for me just to write a quick loader. But I load in my props. I basically init my database, and I'll show you what this is when we get to the exposed portion of the project. I'm using Bootstrap to load data, and I'll show you that again on the exposed portion of this video. And then you start your server up, okay? Here we're saying, this basically says we're going to be working with JSON, and we're going to be using serialization from Kotlin, which is great. Because as I showed you before, I'm not doing I'm not deserializing the data at all. It just comes through and I'm ready to use it right away, both inbound and outbound. When I created it, I'll show you that below. But we've got our core stuff, right? And then here, our first path, our first route serves out index.html. This lives in our common directory, all right? So if you look at this here, this index page is what holds our React application. All my React developers see this root, you know it's going to attach there, right? Then we have that hello path that I showed you. That's basically, you can pull this out. It's not using the demo. But when it comes to serving and getting data, we're just working right now on get and post. And it's that simple. I mean, you saw this code here. I've got some repos, which I'll go into on the exposed side. They're not hard to write. There you go, player and team. That's really it. That's all you have going on your Ktor side. You see I've got some stuff here. These are all easy files. All right. I'm going to go into more of this on the exposed side, but this isn't a lot. Again, you have a lot of short little files here, 30 lines. You know what I mean? This is very easy to maintain. So that, in a nutshell, is Ktor. It runs great. In another video, I'll show you how to Dockerize this so you can actually use this in production. So that is Ktor. So we've gone over multi-platform. We've gone over Ktor. let's look at exposed real quick. So we've all written, again, I'm using the Spring Boot as the whipping boy here. Spring Boot's great. Don't mean to whip on them, but like again, a lot of times this is too much. And speaking of too much, if you're working in Spring Boot, you're probably using Hibernate, Hibernate as your ORM. And we all know Hibernate files are pain in the butt. They're just verbose, a lot of annotations, which I don't like. Let's see how exposed handles all that. All right, so if we were doing this in Spring Boot, we'd have to create our entities. Well, how is that handled in exposed? So on our JVM side, let's look at our models. We've got player and team. We're going to focus on team for the most part for us this demo. Team here, we're basically describing our table, and it's an ID table, which means that there's going to be an ID on it. It's just given to you, right? But the main thing is we have a name column, which is going to be a string column of 20. There's the name of the column. That's it. And then we need to have a vessel to hold this data, on our Ktor application on the JVM side. And we describe that here as an int entity, okay? Team is an int entity. And if you look here, I've got my own interface, and this is just for me to get it out to rest, so I basically can make it into a DTO min or DTO real easy. But that's it. So you'd have your whole team described in basically, 18 lines of code or something like that, if you were not including my nonsense for DTOs. That's it. I mean, this is how you describe your data, how you describe your column, your database column, or database table, rather. Now, to start it is a little bit of work. If we go into our DB factory, I'm basically setting up Hikari data source, and I think it's like 3. My pool size is 3 or something like that. But this is all information that was read in that load props. It's not important for the demo. It's just Kotlin goodness. And then to start the database, we're basically calling database connect, passing in that Hikari. And then to create those tables that we described, we're just going to run this, right? We're going to drop them first and then create them. I'm basically simulating create drop with this DB init mode new. All right. So that's how easy it is to start up your database connection via Ktor when you're using exposed. Now let's look at creating objects in exposed and then retrieving them. So we'll do the creates first. So I said I was trying to do some clean code. You saw an interface I created for creating a team. So let's come here and look at it. So we're going to come to our use cases now on the JVM side, and we're going to look at team create. So real easy. The meat and potatoes of it is literally right here. This is basically what you're doing to create that new record in your team database. You're saying, hey, team, new, within a transaction, right? And then I'm going to come here and I'm going to say, hey, the name is off the rec. That's it. We're going to respond with the data. That's how simple it is. It can't be any easier than this. Okay. Anything else I can think of? Okay, so that's how we create. Updates are just as easy. So if I want to update the team name, I'm just going to grab it here, right, from the database, and I'm going to go over getting data out, and I'm just going to say, hey, this model name is now equal to this, and because it happens within the transaction, it just gets saved right away. All right, so that's how you create. Very easy. Well, let's look at how we get data out. And for this, I wrote some real quick repos. Not hard. I mean, this is a lot of overkill, but I threw a whole bunch of nonsense in here. For the application you saw, I think I'm using 2 calls. I'm using the get all, which gives me all of the teams in the database. And all it is off that team calling all, and we're just mapping it. And that's it. Right? Mapping all those records to the DTO values. For the create, It's not in here because I have the use cases. But if you want to do something a little bit more intricate, get by name, right? This would be some type of weird ass annotation in Spring, right? Well, here I think it reads better. Give me a team whose name equals the name I'm passing in. I mean, I think that reads real well. And you could do an I like if you wanted here for matching, but I mean, it's that simple. Okay. I really like this because it's so fast, it's so quick, easy to write. I think it reads well. But that's the exposed portion of this code. All right. So now let's really focus on the client side, because the client side is going to have a little bit of Ktor going on. I'll show you that in a second, as well as using React. So let's close all this code down. Let's get into our JavaScript code. All right. So all my React programmers, this is going to look a little weird, but you should get it pretty well. Okay. We're writing our JavaScript in Kotlin. Everything you've seen here has been written in Kotlin. Okay. So now I'm writing. This is all going to run while you saw it. Now, because it's Kotlin, we have type-safe code on the client side, which I'm a big fan of. I'm not a big fan of JavaScript. I love this. So, in true React style, we're attaching our code to the root file, and it's really easy. So there's the child include index, and here's our first real Reacty looking code, right? I mean, you see that you know your renders, and this is how you write your React code in Kotlin. It looks a little weird now, but trust me, when you've done it for like an hour or two, it just becomes second nature. It's wonderful. And again, because we're focusing on teams, here you have your team component, and it's got a list of teams, right? That's the entities. And it's getting them from our service and then displaying them down below. And I'm going to walk you through what's going on behind the scenes here. So it's calling get all off of our team service, all right? Team service. And again, this is all because we're using Kotlin JavaScript. It's really easy for you to do super classes and use your generics, which I did here. So I created an abstract class called data store, and all it does is basically it holds items of type in a map based upon the ID. All right. I created a little observed abstract class, and all that is basically keeping a list of page IDs or page describers. So, and it holds functions in the table that'll be executed upon invoke CBs. So what's going on here on the Teams page is I'm registering the callback with the service of saying, hey, here I am on the Teams page. Anytime you change or your invoke CBs is called, just fire this off. So here you have handle store change. When anything in that data store changes, and it's a data store of teams, this is called, and it just sets the state with all the teams that are in the store, and then basically clears out the rec, right? And I'll show you that in a second. So keep that in mind. When I say it clears out the rec, what I'm talking about is right here. This is the rec is backing this form. All right, so if I type stuff in here and I save it, it goes in there, right? So very easy. Again, this is Kotlin writing React. So all I have there is basic and input, and when the input changes, it calls this handle form change, and handle form change is basically just taking the rec that we create at the top and doing a Kotlin copy and just filling in the value. I mean, it's very, very simple stuff. Okay, so this is the client side, right? Now let's see how the client is interacting with the server, because I mentioned that there's Ktor on the client side. That sounds crazy, right? Well, let's look at our build.gradle. What am I talking about? So one of the neat things is Ktor is going to give you some client code, client library to use. So I have it here. And I now have access to this on the client side. So again, let's look at our client side. So you can see here, this HTTP client is being created out of what I just showed you. And what this is going to do, it's going to give me a very easy way of interacting with the server, pulling data out, and then not having to worry about serialization. It's all done for me because it's all using Kotlin serialization. It's all from the common code. Those common DTOs will be pulled out from the server. Very easy. How easy? Let me show you. So we have our JSON client here. Pay attention to that, okay? Let's go back to our store. And let's go back to one of our services. So let's look at the team service. All right, so I want to get all the teams off the server. I showed you before what that endpoint looks like. Well, how are we going to conserve it? Right here, right? This fetch all. That JSON client that I showed you before is saying, hey, get me a list of team DTO. Endpoint is basically just the URL of the server. And then that REST path I'm getting off the DTO. I mean, it's that simple. So now I'm getting this list of DTO when this fires. Again, it's all done with coroutines, so yeah, it's wonderful technology. But I'm just doing a commit, and all it does is it goes to that data store that I showed you before, and it puts this list of data into this store so I can get to it from whatever page I need, right? This was that data store I showed you before. We've got that map. So I'm just basically putting all that information in there, and it's available for me. I can pull it out by ID if I need. Very, very simple. So that is probably the easiest REST client you've ever seen. We've all written them in Axios, which is great, right? Or we've done our, fetch commands, which are great. But if we were to do that, we'd have to either manually transform that data into a DTO that we'd have to write on the JavaScript side, or use a library that does it for us, but the libraries, it's always a little bit of tweaking. There's always extra code here. On our application, it was one line. Boom. Get me a list of team DTO. And that's it. Again, very, very, very simple stuff. All written in Kotlin. You're not going to have to spend your morning writing your Java backend, and you get your Java hat on, and then all of a sudden you got to switch hats and throw on your JavaScript hat on, and you have no type safety, and your generic code in JavaScript is god-awful to debug the deeper you go down. All this is Kotlin. You know what I mean? Again, I can't stress enough how awesome this is. So I showed you multi-platform. We discussed exposed and Ktor, and I showed you a little bit of React code written in Kotlin, which is wonderful. I hope this video helps some people out. And I think the next video, we're going to do some more with this project. I think the next video we put out is we're going to Dockerize it and put it up on a server. I haven't seen a lot on the net on how to Dockerize these applications, but I'm going to show you how to do that in the next video. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel, toss the video a like. If you saw this video and I'm doing stuff wrong, there's probably a good chance I am. Leave in the comments. I'm really trying to learn more on the Ktor side. Love Kotlin, but Ktor is kind of new to me. Exposed is kind of new to me. Anyway, comments are great. Thank you. Have a great day.